My mom would always put them on in the car on long road trips when we were kids. Kept us entertained better than like music, and it's been a while since I've listened to an audiobook. I can transplant myself back to there, and we'll see.
She's imagining a memory of herself imagining.
Literally, yeah.
If you would like to support the efforts and research we are doing here on this podcast, make a donation using the Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes or go to buymeacoffee.com/Shane's Brain. Thank you. Aphantasia is a condition characterized by an inability to visualize mental images in one's mind. If you have just discovered that you or someone you love has aphantasia, or if you're just fascinated by the subject in general and love learning more about it, you are in the right place. The Discovering Your Mind podcast delves into all aspects of the mind's eye, including aphantasia, hyperphantasia, and everything in between. Welcome to the Discovering Your Mind podcast, brought to you by shanesbraindomain.com. I am your host, Shane Williams, also known as Shane's Brain. And today we're going to do part 2 of Discovering the Mind of Laurel Smith-Williams. So welcome back, Laurel. How you doing?
Thank you for having me back. I'm doing good.
Fantastic.
Yay.
And Cole is here again.
Hi.
I think you just heard him.
Hi. I'm just,
all right.
That's my role in this podcast. I'm just making noises in the background.
So now we're going to talk about the other senses.
Okay.
So what I'd like you to do is imagine a chocolate chip cookie in your mind.
That's
okay.
pretty good.
Can you smell it in your mind?
Not super easily.
Okay. On a scale from 1 to 10, how much would you say it's like actual smelling?
Maybe like a 3.
Okay. So getting a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. Still with the cookie, can you taste it in your mind?
Yeah.
On a scale from 1 to 10, how much is that one like actual tasting?
Maybe like a 7.
What about touch? Can you feel the sensation of touch in your mind, in your hands or in your mouth?
Yeah, I can like pick it up and eat it or like break it in pieces or something.
Okay. On a scale from 1 to 10, how real is that one?
Probably like a 10. That's very real to be able to like reach out and touch it. Kind of like with the horse, like previously, like in the meadow, like it's way easier for me to like reach out and touch the horse and to like just make it do things with my mind.
So we're going to do a few extra questions because you answered such a high number on the touch sensitivity. We got some extra questions where we just like to try to push that sense to its limits to see what you can do.
Sounds good.
So I want you to imagine kissing someone on the lips.
Okay.
Okay. Do you feel the pressure of 2 lips meeting? And how hard or soft is it?
Yeah, definitely. Like realistic to memory.
Do you feel anything else, such as the other person's breath, arms, heat, anything?
Nose.
Nose. Do you feel the full physical location of your body in space, or do you just imagine the location of the kiss?
More in my head in general, but like if I extended it to like, oh, I'm standing here, that wouldn't be that difficult to like implement like and I'm standing on the ground like here.
So if you wanted to, you could feel your full physical body.
Mm-hmm.
Can you feel how heavy your own body is?
Mm-hmm.
So I want you to imagine that you grow an extra finger out of your hand.
Okay.
Can you feel it in the same way that you feel your other fingers?
Not quite. Kind of depends on the placement. Like if I put it in between my like second and third fingers, it's a lot easier to think about than like if I attach it to the end, like past my pinky.
Okay, why do you think that is?
Probably because it's like more inside, like my hand's usual space. Also, it would be more useful on the piano, I think. Like, I think of like playing scales on the piano, and it's easier to like move a finger that's extra, like that's in the middle than on the end.
Okay. I think I can kind of understand that, because for me, it's the opposite. I feel it better if it's coming out of the side of my hand. It's a little easier that way. So I was just trying to see why that differed for you. Maybe it's the musical talent thing. I have none of that. So
That's okay.
There you go. I want you to imagine that you stubbed your toe. Can you feel the pain?
Yeah. Done that too many times.
It's not unpleasant.
Very realistic pain, but like the memory of the pain, yeah.
Now imagine that someone else stubs their toe. Can you feel the pain on their behalf?
Yeah. If I watch somebody else round a corner too fast and they stub their toe and they're like, ow, I'm like, oh yeah, I know what that feels like. And it's like a memory of pain. In my mind, but also in my toe.
Okay. Are you cringing just from like the memory and sympathy, or are you actually feeling that pain?
I don't think I'm feeling anything, like any pain physically, but it's like a strong memory of when I have done the exact same thing.
Okay.
In this episode, we will be referring to what we call the nature picture. If you would like to view the nature picture to play along and better understand what we're talking about, you can find it on shanesbraindomain.com in the Aphantasia and Beyond section. If you are unable to take a look at the nature picture, it is a picture of a grove of tall trees with the sun shining brightly through the trees. There is a blue camping chair next to a peaceful flowing river with a campfire nearby. All right, now take a look at that nature picture.
Mm-hmm.
Can you put yourself in that picture?
Yeah, I would love to be in that lawn chair.
So when you do that, can you just see yourself there, or is it more like you are there?
Like looking at the picture, I can imagine myself like plopped into it. Or if I close my eyes, I can kind of enter that world. And once I get beyond the sphere of that picture, I could like fill in and imagine more. But like I can see myself sitting in the chair, or like wading in the river, standing by the fire.
So you can walk around and explore the area?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can you feel any of the weather in your mind? Can you feel the sun on your skin or the breeze in your hair or anything like that?
I guess, should I check that while I'm looking at the picture, or while I like have my eyes closed but I'm like in the picture in my head?
Yeah, since you're obviously having a different experience with your eyes opened versus your eyes closed, just to try and explain the difference and what's happening either way, because that's very interesting, because we've had that before where people are having very different experience based on eyes open or eyes closed. So just whatever's happening, try to explain it.
Okay. Well, if I have my eyes open and I look at the picture, I can like see myself as like a little person in the picture. I can smell the pine trees. I can feel the sun, like guess the time of day, feel the breeze. If I walked over to the fire, then I could like feel the heat, step in the river, feel the cold water. If I like close my eyes, then I'm more like walking around the scene in my head. And yeah, I could also feel those things. I think like it's a little bit easier when I'm like looking at the picture right in front of me, but it's not terribly difficult to like pull it up in my head as well. And if I was like getting into the rhythm of imagining things, it wouldn't be terribly difficult, I think.
Okay. What do you mean by that? By getting into the rhythm of imagining things?
I think for me, it's easier to imagine things if I have like already been sitting there, you know, either staring off into space, versus like if I just like try to sit down and start imagining things just from zero. Like it'll take a couple minutes before I can get into the full ability, I think.
Okay. So when we're talking about being in the picture, experiencing the senses that you mentioned, stepping in the river, you know, hearing the river, hearing the fire, smelling the fire, feeling the breeze, all those things, which one is more realistic? Is it with your eyes closed or your eyes open?
In this case, my eyes open, like looking at the picture, which like feels kind of strange because previously, like,
Right.
and in all my other like imaginings, it's a lot easier with my eyes closed.
Do you think that's just because there's a specific picture that you have to use here in this case?
Potentially. I think like if I were to pull up like a camping memory in my head, it would be like, let's see, we'll try that. Yeah, like if I pull up a camping memory in my head, then it's just as easy to like hear the fire crackle, feel it, like feel the wooden picnic table as we're like playing Uno, smell the pine trees, feel the breeze, see the sky.
Okay. And I'm trying to remember if we talked about this last time, but would you say that your imagination and your memory are two different things? I think we did talk about that.
Yeah, we talked about that.
They're kind of like, they sit next to each other.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they're separate spaces, I think.
Okay. So you're having a little bit better experience with the memory than you are the imagination in this case.
With the memory, it is a memory, and so it feels very realistic. If you were to just say to me, like, imagine yourself in the woods, and I would, plop down in the woods somewhere where I haven't necessarily been before. But if I stood there in my imagination for a minute and added in like a fire and a river, I think it would be very similar.
Okay.
I think honestly, like looking at the picture or like creating a new woodsy space or remembering something, I think as long as I like pull it up in my head, and like now as I get more into the rhythm of like imagining things and seeing things in my head, they're all like very, I guess, like multi senses, like not just like when you're talking about like, oh, can you hear it or like feel it or stuff like that.
So out of the five senses, which one is most prominent or powerful in your mind?
I mean, I think sight probably wins overall, but I don't think the other senses are terribly far behind. They're not muted. All of my like imaginations, daydreams, memories have all the senses attached to them, but I think I would say the sight is probably the strongest out of them all.
Okay. So how would you rank them if you had to rank all of them from most to least?
Sight first, then probably hearing, then probably touch, but touch also including like wind and sun, cold, warm. After that, probably smell, and then probably taste after that.
Okay. So
But
when
if memory is like specifically associated with food, probably flip those two.
okay. Yeah, because when we were talking about the chocolate chip cookie, the smell was the hardest for you.
Mm-hmm.
But when you were in that nature picture, was smell stronger there with the campfire and stuff?
Oh yeah, like I can smell like the trees and the wind and the fire. Or like if I pull up a memory of like my elementary school carnival, like I'm not eating as I'm standing there, but I can smell like the grass and the wind and like the asphalt and stuff like that.
Okay.
But if I was like standing there eating cotton candy, then I could taste that too.
So do you think when you're talking about those memories, your smell is higher than a 3?
Yeah.
What would you say in that case your smell is? 1 to 10?
Probably again like a 7, like 7, 8. Especially if it's outdoors. I love how the outdoors smell. And so like in the winter, I definitely enjoy sitting there and imagining a nice summer day, and I like take a deep breath in and I can almost smell it.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting about these questions and things. There, so much depends on context, right?
Mm.
Since everybody's so unique, I never know, what's going to trigger something for somebody and not very much for others.
All right, let's talk about reading.
Oh,
When you read a novel, is it like a movie in your mind or something else?
definitely a movie. I definitely when I'm reading, I get so sucked into the book, and I can describe so much about the scene that's going on. I really like reading, and I think that's a big part of it.
How well would you say you can visualize the characters and surroundings? Is that pretty incredible detail?
Yeah, I think so. Any book that I've read, I definitely have scenes in my mind. If you asked me to make a movie of a book that I had read, I would be so picky about it because I know what it looks like.
Okay. And so you're seeing everything, including unique character faces and everything?
I think the faces have a little less detail than everything else, but the house that a character lives in, the floor plan, the furniture.
You're making floor plans?
Yeah. It just
cool.
happens. Yeah. Or they'll say in a book, the characters are sitting in the living room and somebody stands up and walks into the kitchen. And I see, okay, well, here's the living room and here's how it's shaped and there's the front door. And then they walk into the kitchen this way. And I think the faces are a little bit vague, but other personality characteristics or other physical characteristics like height, that's very accurate to what I think it should be. It's not like the character's height changes as I read the book, but I think everything but the face is very clear, and the face is a little bit open to interpretation.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, last time when I was asking you about the old lady, to create an old lady, it's the same thing. She didn't have much of a face.
Yeah.
Do you have any idea why that is? Why you struggle with making the faces?
For one, I don't really draw. I have never had much practice creating faces in art.
Okay.
When I make art, it's usually not of people. But I think
so it's just more difficult for you to create.
I think so. And I think I also if I'm reading a book and I know these characters, and I think the more that I know the characters, the more details their face gets. Or if I'm reading a book and it says, this character wrinkled their nose, I see that happen.
Okay. Does it matter how much detail the author goes into about what they look like? Does that make any difference?
For faces, probably. For everything else, probably not. Because when you said, imagine an old lady wearing a yellow dress, a lot of that, auto-populated in my imagination.
Going back to just questions about the book, do you hear the sounds and voices in your mind?
Sound effects, probably not as much. But if I try, then yeah. I think I'm more focused on the person-to-person interaction happening in the dialogue or whatever.
Okay. So do you hear the characters' voices?
Sometimes. Some characters have more of a unique voice than others, I think. And it might also depend on how invested I am in the book.
When you're hearing those voices and the times you are those unique creations of voices, or are those voices you've heard before?
They're pretty vague, and so I feel like they're not copying something that I've heard before. And I think the voice that I'm imagining has a lot to do with the character's personality, and so it's a more generalized what I think this character's personality would sound like in a voice. And so I don't think it's terribly precise and unique, but it's definitely not other people's voices that I know.
So it's unique, but not like super detailed or like.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. What about narration? Do you hear any narration in your mind?
Like when I read a book and I read a sentence that's, like not a person speaking, I mean, I hear it read in my mind, but I don't think it has a specific voice. And if it does, it's probably mine.
Okay. So you hear it, but it doesn't have a voice? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, like it has, like you'd read, like the way you'd read a comma or an exclamation point or like a narrator tone of voice. Yeah, I hear it, but it's not very like specific voice. I think I have the same narrator voice for anything that I read. And it reads like all the punctuation and like the inflection and all that, like you should, if you were reading out loud.
Can you tell if it's a specific voice? Like, is it a man's voice or a woman's voice? Can you put your finger on that, or is it kind of vague?
I think I would honestly have to put it in the middle. Like, it's not a deep voice, but it's not a high voice. Like, it is a little vague, but it's very like mid-range.
Okay.
Interesting.
So pretty much every question we ask you, you close your eyes, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you're reading a book, you can't close your eyes, right? You got to read the book.
Mm-hmm.
So is there a different experience happening there? Do you think you could visualize it better with your eyes closed if you could? Or like, I'm just curious about that dynamic with you.
I think when I'm reading, I do see it very clearly in my head. If I'm very familiar with the book, I can go back and rewatch it.
Oh, really?
Later. Mm-hmm. But like as if it was a favorite memory, like something that got kind of cemented in my brain very clearly. Favorite parts of books as well. I can go back and rewatch it and I can kind of like plant myself like, 20 feet away from the characters and just like watch and listen and feel like if it's in the rain, then I can like feel the rain and all that. But I think if I'm like rewatching it later, then I would close my eyes. But if I'm reading, maybe it's just because like what's on the page has to do with what I'm imagining, or maybe it's just like the stimulus material for it. I feel like I do like see it in my head just as vividly when I'm reading, or honestly, probably even more vividly because it's like being described to me at that moment.
Well, then what about audiobooks? Do you have more vivid imagery with audiobooks? Do you like audiobooks at all?
I do like audiobooks, yeah. My mom would always put them on in the car on long road trips when we were kids. It kept us entertained better than like music, and it's been a while since I've listened to an audiobook. I can transplant myself back to there and we'll see.
She's imagining a memory of herself imagining.
Literally, yeah.
This is memoryception.
I don't remember super clearly, but I do remember like staring out the window of the car, but paying a lot more attention to the book than whatever was going on outside. So more likely than not, I was like seeing it in my head.
Okay. So you mentioned earlier that like if someone were to ask you to make a movie of a book you've read, that you would be like really hyper specific and picky about it all.
Yeah.
Do you find like if you were to watch a movie and it had some things wrong, would you become like disappointed because it didn't match your preconceived notions of what things were supposed to look like or sound like or be like?
Yeah, I think so. Like there are some really good books that I've read. I already have a movie in my head, and sometimes I'm like afraid that the movie that somebody else made just wouldn't be as good.
Spread laughter all around with funny and witty t-shirts from Shane's Brain. Check out fan favorites like Once in a Blue Moon, Tired of Laundry, and the Ramalama Ding Dong shirts, all on shanesbraindomain.com. Cool. What do you do to fall asleep?
Sit down for more than 20 minutes passively or lay down.
Okay.
It's not very hard.
It's not very hard. Okay. What's going on in your mind when that happens? Because a lot of the visual people I talk to, it is hard for them to fall asleep because they've got so much going on in their mind. So What is it about it for you that makes it easy?
I think, well, exhaustion is always helpful after just a very long day. I hit a point in the evening where I no longer care about what else I need to do because it can wait till tomorrow morning, whether or not it's like fairly simple, like put the dishes away that are dry, or whether it's like a homework assignment. At some point, I'm like, well, it's not on fire, so I'm going to bed. And I think at that point, a lot of other things are getting shut out of my brain. I'm like, I don't care, I'm tired. I don't care, I'm tired. And so by the time my head hits the pillow, my brain is not racing, usually.
For those of you trying to glean advice from this podcast, Laurel essentially told you to stop caring.
Past 11 p.m.
Past 11 p.m., no longer caring. It's fair enough.
I often don't need much help to fall asleep. I have something called idiopathic hypersomnia, which is narcolepsy's twin sibling. So medically, I conk out much faster than the rest of the human population.
That's helpful information.
Yeah.
All right. How vivid and detailed are your dreams?
Very, very vivid and detailed. And sometimes I have a hard time right when I wake up remembering if any of it was real or not. Like the other day, I woke up from a nap and I said to Kevin, I was like, hang on, did you say like this phrase earlier today or was that in my dream? And he was like, nope, that's definitely in your dream. And I was like, wow, well, you said it in my dream and it really sounded like something you would say. But I wasn't so sure when I woke up. He had been baking bread earlier that day. And so it was something to do with like, oh yeah, he said, most food is carbogenous. And I was like, carbogenous, carbohydrate containing. And I was like, did you say that? He's like, no.
I would be shocked if he had used carbogenous in a normal sentence.
Yeah, but apparently that's what that word means. And apparently I was not sure if that was real or not. Most food is carbogenous, not Kevin.
You're quoting not people now? I don't think that's how quotes work.
All right. So I'm assuming your dreams are in color.
Yeah.
And can you experience like all of the other senses in your dreams as well?
I think so, yeah. The strangest thing about my dreams is that I feel like I never have my glasses on. And I can't okay, my vision's not that bad. But in my dreams, my vision is much worse than it is in reality. So it's in color, but I feel like the reason that I'm not able to do what I want to do in my dreams is that my vision is poor.
You think it's just that your memories don't have a lot of detail and your mind's just coming up with an excuse for it?
No, but like if I remember this time when I was a kid dreaming like I was like trying to walk and run around the playground, like my kindergarten playground. And I remember feeling frustrated that I like couldn't walk where I wanted to walk because I couldn't see stuff that well. And I would end up like, 6 feet off of where I was aiming or like having a hard time, like finding the door or like stuff like that. But yeah, I often have poor vision in my dreams, but it is all in color and I have like all the other senses, I think.
What would you call a doctor that diagnoses poor eyesight in the dreamscape?
Man, I don't know.
So when you're dreaming, do you ever know you're dreaming?
Sometimes.
So when that's happening, are you aware of your thoughts when you're dreaming?
Like thoughts within the dream or thoughts like, oh, I'm dreaming.
Either one. I don't know what half these questions mean.
Gotcha.
He just asks them and then listens. Yeah, because people will mention stuff like that, and so I add it in, but I can't make sense of any of it, honestly.
No, yeah, I definitely have thoughts in my dreams. I'm usually trying to perform some function, like do something, and I'm thinking like logically and trying to accomplish that task.
Okay.
like find the door in from the playground. Or like
apparently is impossible.
I guess I remember being frustrated that I couldn't see well enough to find it. But like I've had other dreams where it my vision's not great, but it's not nearly so frustrating. I also usually dream a lot more if I am caught up on sleep or if I'm getting too much sleep. If I'm really tired, I don't really dream. But if I am getting like 8 hours consistently, that honestly is like too much for me. And so I will start having very vivid dreams to the point where I don't feel like I've rested well. But then I wake up in the morning and I'm not tired. So like, yeah, I rested, but the dreams are so vivid. Like I remember feeling this a lot when I was serving as a missionary, because I would sleep like on the schedule that we had. Like they give you the schedule and you keep the schedule. That includes 8 hours of sleep. And I remember like, I was like, man, I have never had so many dreams in my life, getting 8 hours of sleep because I am told that I need to. Like,
so that's an interesting detail I've never heard before, that the more vivid and active the dreams are, the less rest you feel like you get because you've been...
I feel like if I get too much sleep on a regular basis, it's like my brain goes, we got so much time, let's have some fun.
Right.
And if I am getting less sleep, or it feels like a scarcity, then my brain's like, sleep hard and fast. We only got 6 hours.
For those of you trying to glean information from this podcast and advice, Laurel is basically saying that 8 hours, the recommended amount of sleep, is too much.
Yeah, for some people. For me,
we're just keeping
definitely.
track.
Yeah. Yeah, don't care about anything after 11 p.m. and try for like 7, not 8.
Yeah.
Sounds good to me.
I'm still thinking about, so if you're, so your body's asleep, right? It's getting rest. But in your dream, you're water skiing. So therefore...
You've never felt that, Dad?
No.
I understood exactly. That wasn't even a question for me. Like, obviously, when you have an intensive dream,
you had rest. All right. So you had nice 8 hours of sleep. You wake up and you say, "Oh, I'm exhausted because I've been water skiing all night."
And I feel legitimately like I slept poorly until I like get up and like eat breakfast, start my day, and then I'm like, "Oh, I did get 8 hours, and I'm okay."
Yeah, Dad, if your 5-year-old self was bumping against walls trying to find the door, you'd be exhausted too.
That's crazy.
My mom said that when she was in high school, she would go to bed after doing homework, and she would figure out the rest of her homework in her dreams, like accurately, and then not remember it when she woke up and have to go do it all again. Isn't that terrible?
At first, I was going to say that's the most amazing thing ever because you can do your homework subconsciously.
But she's like, my brain worked on it all night, figured it out, and it wasn't done in the morning.
Dang.
My dreams are a little bit mysterious. I'm not sure exactly how they manifest, but I do have dreams. And that reminded me of one of the things I've done a lot in my career is design Valpak ads. So sometimes in my dreams, like all night, I'm designing Valpak ads in my dream, and I wake up and it just pisses me off. I'm like, come on, you can do better than that.
Yeah.
Went to bed and did work. So would you say that how you visualize affects how you perform in your career?
Probably, yeah.
Okay. In what ways?
I'm a chemist. And when they talk about molecules reacting, like I can see in my head like how it lines up and binds and like switches places and all that. So I think it helps me like conceptually understand what's going on at the molecular level. which helps me know like why I'm doing what I'm doing and why it works. As part of my work, I also design microfluidic devices. I mean, I 3D model it on the computer and then I go 3D print it. But like in doing that, if somebody suggests like design improvements, or like if I'm like thinking of how can I improve that design, I can like see it in my head what I want it to look like. And then I can try to make it like in the CAD model. I also work as like a teaching assistant. And so I think when I try to explain things to students, I definitely like see it in my head. I think I visualize in a lot of the work that I do, even if it's like different types of work, or even like housework. Like if I'm thinking of like, well, what would I want in a garden someday, like a flower garden? And I can like mentally put like this kind of tree, that kind of flower, how would that look? Oh, I like that. Take a note of that for the future when you actually own a house. So I would say like, whether it's like job work or just like daily work, visualization plays a big part in it.
When you say take a note of that, if you're visualizing your garden, take a note of that. Can you almost take like a snapshot picture of that and then pull that up again later? Does it work like that or not?
Yeah. So currently Kevin's parents' house, the backyard is right up against a construction zone for some road construction. And so when it's finished, I'm going to redo some of the landscaping in the backyard that got a little wrecked from all the construction. And so like, yeah, the example of like thinking of like a garden that we would want to put there, as his parents invited everybody to like, you know, give your input. What would you want to see in the backyard when we redo it? And I can like imagine these things up, go, oh, that's really pretty. Click, and then pull it up again later.
That is so cool.
And when I say like take a note of that, that also usually means like write down what plant that is.
Okay.
Did you do well in school or did you struggle?
I did well in school, yeah.
Okay. Do you think your visualization played a role in that?
Probably. I would say so. I think that would most come up like when I'm taking an exam and I'm trying to remember something.
If you are studying your notes, you know, you've written some notes for a test, and then you're in the test, could you pull up those notes in your mind and read them?
To a certain degree. Sometimes I'll go, I know it's written in green in this spot on the page, and I can't read it. Like I can see the page of notes. I would often take notes in like glitter gel pen in high school. And now that I take notes on a laptop, I have like a stylus and I still do it in fun colors. And so often like that'll come up when I'm like trying to remember something on a test. I'll be like, oh, I know where it is. I know what it looks like. I don't know what it says.
Okay.
But I can't like read a page of notes like photographically.
Okay. Good. He's not going to accuse you of cheating. That's where this conversation tends to go.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Well, my wife told me that she could do that.
That's really cool.
Yeah, that's cheating. You got to remember where I'm coming from, man. I got nothing.
True. That's true. Photographic memory versus aphantasia would definitely have a little advantage / disadvantage on exams.
I tell you. I was like, well, no wonder I sucked at school. I can't do any of that fancy stuff.
All right. If you woke up tomorrow and had aphantasia, how do you think it would affect your life?
I think I'd be sad at the loss of a lot of my memories, because the way that I remember them is so like retrieve the movie reel, play it, and I'm in it. And so I think I don't even know what I would remember without having it that way. I think I would no longer enjoy like staring off into space, like doing nothing, quote, but my brain is like having fun imagining. And I think it would become harder at work, especially with the microfluidic devices, as somebody's like, oh, well, try doing it this way and route it this way, and I couldn't see it. I think it'd be harder that way, or like I'd be like, well, can you draw it out on the board for me? Instead of like just trying to see it in my head. And sometimes I still do be like, oh, will you draw that on the board? And then I'm like, now I see what you mean. But I think I would mostly like, I don't think it'd be a good thing. I'm sorry.
No skin off my nose. I mean, I'm at peace with it for the most part, but I am super curious when I hear you guys, describing things. I would really like to experience it, even if it was just for one day, just to know what it's like.
Do you think it'd be fun?
I do think it'd be fun.
For the most part, it is fun. I think it's very fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think I would probably be like a kid in the candy store,
Yeah.
I would probably be just like, oh my gosh, look at this thing. I do think it would be fun for sure.
All right, this is kind of a catch-all question. If you were to try to give a general description of how your mind works and what you see in your mind's eye, how would you describe it?
It's definitely like stepping into another world, whether it's a world that I imagined or whether it's a memory that I have, especially a memory that I hold dear. I step right into it and I can interact with it and enjoy the world around me, even though it's in my mind.
Okay, that's a pretty good description. So we've talked a lot about the upsides of your visualization, all the things it brings into your life. Do you think there's any downsides?
I feel like it's a blessing to feel like I have pretty good mental control with the visualization that I have. If I didn't have a pretty good handle on like my mind or like what do I want in my mind or what not, I feel like that would be hard. But
I can speak from experience and say it is.
Yeah. I, interestingly and thankfully, feel like I do have the ability to delete things that I don't want in my head. I just kind of like can slap a big gray sticker over it and push it over the edge of the cliff on my memory and it shatters.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That is really cool. I'm so glad you mentioned that, because one of the things we talk about with some of our guests is the phrase, I can't unsee it. Right? And they describe, I literally can't unsee it, and it pops up when I don't want it to. And so it sounds like you have real control over that.
I feel like I do, which I say that like pretty gratefully, because there are a lot of people who feel like, where it's like, oh yeah, everything like annoying or things that I rather would have not experienced in my life, like can't get it out of my head. I don't know. At some point I learned how to just slap a box over it and push it off a cliff. And I visually do that in my mind. Like I just like slap a big gray box over it and I push it off the cliff and it falls and it shatters and it's gone.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I feel like that's a blessing. It would be really hard if I didn't have the ability to control what's in my head.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to talk about, or any other questions, comments, song and dance numbers? Anything?
I think there's only one other interesting tidbit that's come into my mind as we've talked about visualization.
Okay.
When I was taking piano lessons from my first piano teacher, and I studied with her until I was about 15, how you start a piano piece matters a lot. If you start off on the wrong foot, you can recover, but it throws you off. And it matters in a performance, like what's the first thing that you hear and that people hear. And so she taught me, before you sit down to play a piece, see yourself and hear yourself playing the first line in your head the way it should sound, and then play it for real. And it works. I think that was a cool visualization thing that I learned that was very helpful. And I still do that especially whenever I'm going to perform. I visualize the first few measures of the piece of music, and it really makes a difference in how it comes out of my fingers.
All right. Well, thanks again, Laurel, for your time twice.
Woo.
And
extra commitment. You get a gold star.
Thank you. It was fun.
Yeah, lots of really cool, interesting details in there. And you're one of those, hyperphantasia.
Well, what is the definition of hyperphantasia then?
Hyperphantasia is the condition of having extremely vivid mental imagery. It has been described as vivid as real seeing. Hyperphantasia is the ability to explore within one's imagination, but at extreme levels. People with hyperphantasia can form very vivid visual images and sensations in their minds.
Okay. Interesting.
Aphantasia's on one end, hyperphantasia's on the other, and there's everything in between exists as well.
Interesting. Okay.
We've interviewed people across pretty much every form of categorization you can think of and more.
That's really cool. It's kind of fun to stretch my imagination and see what does it do?
Yeah, what's in there?
I guess that's what you call it, discovering your mind.
Exactly.
There you go.
Things you didn't know were in there.
Yep.
It's exactly the reason.
That's cool.
All right. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
See ya.
If you like what you hear, please subscribe, follow, and engage with us, and share it with your friends and family as we continue to explore this fascinating subject. For additional information about this episode or Shane's Brain, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening to the Discovering Your Mind podcast. You are beautifully unique.